Picture this. You just talked a salesperson down $1,500 off the sticker price. You shake hands, you sign, and for a second you feel like you just won. You beat the system. You out-negotiated a professional whose entire job is negotiating. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The dealership is probably still smiling too. In fact, on that exact deal, the one where you won, the dealership might have made more profit than they would have on a customer who paid full sticker price in cash and walked out the door. That's not a typo. That's not bad negotiating on your part. That's the business model working exactly as designed because the sticker price war? That's theater. It's the part of the transaction dealerships want you focused on because while you're fighting over a few $1,000s on the car itself, the real money is quietly changing hands somewhere else entirely. In rooms you barely remember walking through, on forms you signed in under a minute. If you've ever bought a car, new, used, financed, cash, doesn't matter, there's a good chance you've been part of a deal you didn't fully understand. Not because you're not smart, because the entire system is built so that you wouldn't. So let's pull back the curtain. Where does a dealership actually make its money? And why is the number on the windshield almost never the number that matters? Most people assume dealerships are gouging them on the new car itself. Sticker price feels like a number pulled from thin air, padded with fat margin just waiting to be negotiated away. So let's test that assumption with real numbers. Say you're looking at a new SUV with an MSRP of $35,000. The dealer's invoice price, what they actually paid the manufacturer, might be around $33,000. Right there, that looks like a $2,000 markup. Case closed, right? Except that's not the full picture. And this is where most buyers stop looking too soon. Manufacturers often pay dealers something called holdback. Typically 2 to 3% of MSRP paid back to the dealer after the sale, essentially as a volume incentive. On our $35,000 SUV, that might be around $800. Sounds like extra profit, right? Except that holdback usually just offsets another cost most buyers never think about. Floor plan interest, the money dealers borrow to stock that vehicle on the lot in the first place. Every day a car sits unsold, it's quietly accruing interest, like a mortgage on inventory. Add it up, and on plenty of new vehicles, especially the popular ones dealers compete hardest to move. True margin after invoice cost, holdback, and floor plan interest can shrink to 2 to 5%, sometimes less. On certain high-demand models sold at invoice to win a sale, dealers can genuinely break even, or even lose money on the vehicle itself. Here's the myth buster. Buyers walk in assuming new cars are where the dealership gets rich. In reality, new cars are frequently a loss leader, a product sold thin, sometimes even at a loss, specifically to get you in the building and keep the lot moving. So if the car itself barely turns a profit, why does the dealership seem to be doing just fine? Why are the lights on, the staff paid, the building beautiful? Because somewhere between the test drive and the drive home, you walk into a small office, sit across from someone with a stack of paperwork, and sign a few more forms than you expected. That office is where the real math begins. Here's the part almost nobody thinks about after they've agreed on a price. Because at that point, you think the hard part's over. You've won the negotiation. You've got your number. Now you just have to sign the paperwork. Except that paperwork is where the dealership makes its real money. It's called the F&I office. Finance and insurance. And it's usually a small, quiet room you walk into after the excitement of picking your car has already worn off. You're tired. You're ready to be done. And that's exactly the emotional state this office is designed for. Inside, a few things happen. First, financing. If you finance through the dealer, they often mark up the interest rate above what the bank actually approved them for, a spread called dealer reserve. You might qualify for a 5% rate, get offered 6.5%, and never know the difference existed. Then come the extras: extended warranties, gap insurance, paint and fabric protection, tire and wheel packages. Each one presented smoothly, each one sounding reasonable in isolation. Individually, these look like minor add-ons. Collectively, they're often the single largest profit center in the entire transaction. Industry estimates suggest F&I can account for 60 to 80% of a dealership's total profit per vehicle sold, not the car. The paperwork, let's make this personal. Imagine two buyers, Sarah and Marcus, both buying the identical car at the identical negotiated price. Sarah pays cash, declines every add-on, and walks out in 20 minutes. Marcus finances through the dealer and says yes to the extended warranty and gap coverage. Same car, same sticker, same win at the negotiating table. But Marcus's deal might generate more profit for the dealership than Sarah's, not because of the car, but because of what happened after the car was already agreed upon. One signature in one back office can be worth more than the vehicle itself. This is the moment worth rewinding your own memory for. Think back to your last car purchase. Do you remember what interest rate you actually qualified for versus what you were offered? Do you remember what you said yes to in that office and why it felt so easy to say yes? That's not an accident. That's the best performing department in the building. So if new cars barely turn a profit and F&I quietly carries the business, where does that leave the cars sitting just a few rows over, the ones with someone else's old floor mats still in them? As it turns out, the used car lot isn't the sketchy afterthought people assume. It might be the most quietly rational part of the entire operation. Most people picture the used car lot as the discount aisle, the place where deals go to get sketchy, where salespeople are pushier and the cars are older. But dig into the actual numbers, and you'll find something almost backwards. Used cars are often more profitable per unit than new ones, sometimes 2 to 4 times more profitable. Here's how that works. Using a trade-in as our example, say a customer trades in a car, we'll call it a mid-size sedan, and the dealer appraises it at $10,000. That number isn't pulled from a hat. It accounts for what the dealer expects to spend fixing it up. Let's say reconditioning costs, new brakes, a detail, minor bodywork, maybe a tire or two, run about $1,000. So the dealer's real cost in that vehicle is around $11,000. Now that same car goes back out on the lot, retail ready, priced around $14,000 to $15,000. Do the math, that's a gross profit of $3,000 to $4,000 on a single vehicle. Compare that to the 2% margin we calculated earlier on a new SUV, a gap of maybe $700. And the contrast is stark. The boring trade-in sitting in the corner of the lot might be worth 4 to 5 times more to the dealership than the shiny new model in the showroom window. And here's the twist that makes this even more interesting. That trade-in didn't come from a used car auction or a wholesale lot. It came from the exact same new car sale we walked through earlier, the one that barely broke even. The new car deal, thin as it was, is often what generates the profitable used car in the first place. One transaction quietly funds the next. So the next time you assume the used car section feels a little more transactional, a little sharper edged than the new car showroom, you're not imagining things. It often is sharper because it has to carry more of the actual weight of the business. It's not the sketchy afterthought. It's frequently the more rational, higher margin engine running quietly in the background. But margin isn't the whole story. Every car sitting on that lot, new or used, profitable or not, is costing the dealership money every single day it doesn't sell. And that hidden clock might be the most dangerous number in the entire business. Every car on that lot, gleaming, spotless, price tag in the window, is quietly losing the dealership money before a single customer even walks up. Not because of theft, not because of damage. Because of interest, dealerships don't buy their inventory outright with cash sitting in a vault. They borrow to stock the lot through something called floor plan financing, essentially a line of credit used to purchase vehicles from the manufacturer, with interest accruing every single day the car sits unsold. It's less like owning a shop full of product, and more like renting the right to have that product physically present, paying by the day for the privilege. Let's make it concrete. Say a dealer stocks a $40,000 truck, financed through floor plan, at a rate of, say, 8% annually. That works out to roughly $9 in interest cost per day just for that truck to sit there. Doesn't sound like much until it's been sitting for 60 days. That's over $500 evaporated, with 0 customers, 0 revenue. Nothing to show for it except a slowly aging price tag and a growing hole in the dealer's margin. Now multiply that truck by an entire lot. 50 vehicles, 100 vehicles, some sitting for a week, some for 4 months, and you start to understand why dealerships behave the way they do at the end of every month. That everything must go sale, the dramatic signage, the inflated sounding discounts, the sudden urgency in the salesperson's voice, that's not generosity. That's a business bleeding cash day by day on unsold inventory, and choosing to take a smaller loss now rather than a bigger one later. The clearance event isn't a gift to you, it's damage control. This is also exactly why rising interest rates hit dealerships so much harder than most people realize. It's not just that customers face higher loan payments. The dealership itself is paying more to simply keep cars on the lot at all. A rate environment that quietly doubles floor plan interest can turn a marginally profitable inventory strategy into a genuine liability, car by car, day by day. So between thin new car margins and this daily inventory bleed, it might seem like dealerships are constantly walking a financial tightrope. And in the volatile departments, they are. But not every part of this business lives and dies by what's parked out front. There's one department that barely notices when the lot goes quiet, and it might be the most reliably profitable part of the entire operation. While the showroom is fighting over thin margins, and the lot is silently bleeding interest by the day, there's a department in the back of every dealership that just keeps humming along. No dramatic sales events, no haggling, no inventory risk. It's called fixed operations, service and parts, and it might be the single most underrated profit center in the entire business. Here's why it's so different. When you bring your car in for an oil change, a brake job, or a check engine light, you're usually not negotiating. You're not cross-shopping 5 other dealerships for the best price on a timing belt replacement the way you'd shop for the car itself. You need it fixed, you trust the shop that knows your vehicle, and you pay what's on the invoice. That trust translates into margin, and not a thin one. While new car sales might net 2 to 5%, fixed operations can run gross margins of 40 to 50% or higher on labor and parts combined. Think about that gap for a second. The department everyone overlooks is often 10 times more profitable per dollar of revenue than the department with the giant balloons out front. And it doesn't stop at one visit. A customer who buys a car often comes back for years of maintenance, oil changes, tire rotations, recalls, warranty work, creating something close to a subscription revenue stream, except nobody thinks of it that way. It's steady, it's predictable. It doesn't care whether new car sales are up or down this quarter, or whether floor plan interest rates just spiked. This is the classic razor and blades model, hiding in plain sight at your local dealership. The car is the razor, sold thin, sometimes at a loss, just to get you in the door. The service department is the blades, the quiet, recurring, high-margin revenue that actually stabilizes the business over time. So if you're tallying up where the real value sits, thin-margin new cars, high-margin used cars, F&I profit, floor plan risk, and now this steady fixed ops engine, you might think you found the full picture. But there's one more layer, and it's the one that determines what this entire business is actually worth when someone decides to buy or sell it. Here's a question worth sitting with. If you were buying an entire dealership, not a car, the whole business, what do you think you'd be paying for? The buildings? The land? The rows of inventory sitting on the lot? Actually, no. Those things matter, but they're not the prize. The real value, the number that makes dealership transactions worth millions or even tens of millions of dollars, is something with a strange, almost poetic name. Blue sky. Blue sky is essentially goodwill. The value of the manufacturer franchise rights, the customer relationships, the service reputation, the territory itself. It's intangible, it's not sitting on any shelf, and yet it's often worth far more than everything physical on the property combined. Here's the gap that catches people off guard. Someone unfamiliar with the industry might look at a dealership and value it the obvious way. Add up the inventory on the lot, the equipment, the real estate, maybe the cash in the till. Reasonable guess, right? Except actual dealership sale prices routinely run at several multiples of annual profit, driven almost entirely by that blue sky value, not the physical assets. A dealership generating, say, $3 million in annual profit might sell for 10 times that or more, largely because the buyer isn't purchasing cars and buildings. They're purchasing a scarce government-regulated right to sell a specific brand in a specific territory to an already loyal customer base that keeps coming back for service for years. That reframes everything we've walked through. Owning a dealership isn't really like owning a retail store, where value is tied to shelves and inventory turns. It's closer to owning a license, a protected, hard-to-obtain right to operate, layered on top of an established, recurring relationship with an entire community of customers. So we've gone from the sticker price everyone fights over, to the F&I office where the real per-deal profit hides, to the used cars quietly outperforming new ones, to the daily interest bleeding away on unsold inventory, to the steady service department stabilizing it all, and now to the invisible asset that makes the entire operation worth buying in the first place. Which raises the real question this video set out to answer. Now that you can see all 5 layers clearly, what should you actually do with that knowledge, as a buyer, or even as someone considering the business itself? Remember that buyer from the very beginning, the one who negotiated $1,500 off sticker, shook hands, and drove off feeling like they'd won? By now, you know the truth. They may have won a battle on a number that barely mattered to the dealership's bottom line, while the war was already decided somewhere else entirely. Let's tie it together. New cars. Thin margin, often a loss leader. F&I. The quiet room where 60 to 80% of per-vehicle profit actually lives. Used cars, 2 to 4 times more profitable than new, funded by the very trade-ins that came from those thin-margin new car deals. Floor plan financing, a daily interest bill ticking on every unsold vehicle, explaining every urgent clearance sale you've ever seen. Fixed operations, the boring, steady 40 to 50% margin department that keeps the whole business upright. And blue sky, the invisible asset, worth more than everything physical combined. That makes the entire operation valuable to begin with. So what do you actually do with this? If you're buying a car, negotiate the price, sure, But save your real energy for the F&I office. That's where the rate markups and add-on packages live. And that's where a sharp question can save you more than any haggling over sticker price ever will. If you're evaluating dealership ownership or dealer stocks, stop looking at car sales volume as the headline number. Look at fixed ops revenue and franchise value, the parts that don't panic when the market does. And keep this in mind, no haggle. Online first dealers are already attacking exactly the layers we just exposed. The markup, the F&I spread, the opacity. Whether that model wins is a question for another video. But you're no longer the buyer in the dark, celebrating the wrong victory. You know exactly where the real deal happens.